My fiancée publicly mocked my family during our engagement party, so I called off the wedding in front of everyone, and they were left humiliated. I'm a 28-year-old guy, and I thought I had finally found someone who truly understood me. From the moment Chloe walked into my life, it felt like everything I'd been waiting for had somehow aligned perfectly. I'm not the type to fall for charm. Alone I work long hours, keep my family close, and rarely let anyone in but with her. It felt effortless. She laughed at the things I found funny, challenged me in ways that pushed me to be better, and somehow made the chaos of everyday life feel like a little adventure. I remember the nights we'd stay up talking until the sun crept through the blinds, sharing stories about our childhoods, our families, and the things we wanted from life. She had this way of making me feel heard, really heard, like no one had ever truly listened before. It wasn't just infatuation, it was connection, and I loved that. I loved the way she noticed the small things, how my mom made her favorite chocolate, chip cookies, or how my younger brother tried to play guitar in the background whenever we hung out. She fit into my life seamlessly, and for the first time, I imagined what it would feel like to build a life with someone I trusted completely. Chloe was charming and witty in every social setting, too. Family dinners, parties, casual hangouts with friends, she carried herself with this effortless grace. People adored her. I adored her. Even my friends, who can be brutally honest, kept remarking, "Man, you've got yourself a keeper." We talked about marriage casually at first, then seriously imagining our engagement, the wedding, the future. We laughed about the small traditions we wanted to carry on, the trips we'd take, even the awkward family photos we'd inevitably pose for. I felt proud introducing her to my parents and siblings, watching her charm them without even trying. In that moment, I believed our bond was unshakable, that we were building something rare and real. I had no idea that this feeling of absolute certainty, of trust, of joy, of future plans was about to be tested in ways I couldn't yet imagine. Planning the engagement party was supposed to be fun, but even then, I started noticing little things about Chloe that made me pause. She was meticulous, which I appreciated at first, making lists, checking invitations, obsessing over seating arrangements, but sometimes her helpful suggestions came with a sharp edge, a subtle jab at how my family did things. I brushed it off, telling myself she was just detail-oriented, that she didn't mean anything by it. But the way she rolled her eyes when my mom suggested homemade decorations, or how she laughed at my dad's corny jokes a little too patronizingly, left a small, uncomfortable knot in my chest. My parents noticed too, and I could tell they were a little wary. My mom would glance at me with that worried look she always gets when something doesn't feel right. My younger brother, unaware of the tension, would nervously ask questions, and Chloe's responses were polite but laced with that sly humor that made everything feel slightly off. I kept rationalizing it. Though this was my fiancée, my future wife, she was clever, funny, and charming. Everyone else seemed to love her, so maybe I was imagining things. We spent nights together going over every detail of the party, food, music, seating, even the tiny favors we'd hand out. Sometimes she'd tease me about my obsessive planning, laughing in a way that made me feel like I was being infantilized, like my years of careful thought didn't matter. I told myself she was joking, but inside, there was a flicker of doubt. Could someone so sharp and polished really be so oblivious to how these little digs felt? Still, there were moments that erased all doubt. When she held my hand and said, "I just want everyone to have a perfect time because you deserve it," I melted. That warmth reminded me of why I loved her, why I trusted her, and why I was so ready to spend the rest of my life with her. I felt that surge of optimism again, that belief that we were building something real. But even in those moments, I couldn't shake the tiny, nagging feeling at the back of my mind that something about Chloe's charm wasn't as simple as it seemed, and I had no idea how soon that charm would start to crack, revealing a side of her I never expected. As the engagement party drew closer, the little things about Chloe started to pile up. At first, I brushed them off, her sarcastic jokes, the way she'd correct my parents in front of me, or the sharp little remarks about my family's quirks. But over time, they stopped feeling playful. It was like every comment was a test, a way to assert control. And I started noticing the looks my parents exchanged when she did it. They'd glance at each other, eyebrows raised, before turning back with strained smiles. I felt caught in the middle, torn between defending my family and trying to keep the peace. It hit me most during a casual dinner at my place. Chloe leaned back, glass in hand, and said, "Your mom's lasagna is interesting." I didn't expect it to be so. Rustic. My dad laughed nervously, trying to ease the tension, but I could feel my jaw tighten. "It's the way she's always made it," I mumbled, forcing a smile, but inside I was simmering. My mom looked hurt, blinking rapidly as if to fight back tears, but holding it in. I wanted to explode, but part of me still hoped Chloe was just joking. Then came the whispers of subtle condescension in front of friends. At a small gathering, she teased my brother for his messy desk and childish hobbies, making everyone chuckle except me. I wanted to step in, but the words got stuck in my throat. The laughter around me made me feel small, like my family was being silently judged while I sat there, powerless. Even at home, late at night, Chloe's charm would slip into something sharper. She'd smirk, half teasing, half taunting, "You're too protective of your little family. Don't you think they could take a joke?" And I'd feel a pang of doubt. Was I overreacting? Was I imagining the way she subtly undermined them? I told myself I could handle it. I loved her. I trusted her. But that nagging unease had started to settle in my chest like a weight, whispering that maybe the person I thought I knew wasn't who she really was. And I had no idea that the first major crack in our relationship was about to appear at the very party. We were supposed to celebrate together. The day of the engagement party finally arrived, and I should have been buzzing with excitement. I'd spent weeks planning, coordinating with my parents, and making sure everything would be perfect. But the moment Chloe walked through the door, I felt a knot tighten in my chest. She looked stunning, of course, effortless, radiant, but there was this glint in her eyes, a confident, almost mischievous spark that made me wonder if she was planning something. I tried to shake it off. This was our celebration. Nothing could ruin it. The party started well enough. Guests arrived, laughter filled the room, and the smell of fresh flowers mingled with the rich aroma of catered food. Chloe worked the crowd, dazzling everyone with her charm, telling funny stories, and laughing at jokes, even the corniest ones. I felt proud watching her, imagining my friends and family, thinking, "He really did well." But then, like a tiny ripple in calm water, her remarks began to surface. A joke about my father's old car, a comment about my mom's thriftiness, harmless to an outsider. But to me, they stung at first. I tried to laugh along, brushing off the little digs as harmless teasing. My parents smiled politely, though I could see the flicker of discomfort in their eyes. My younger brother whispered under his breath, "Man, she's sharp tonight," and I nodded, forcing a grin. Chloe seemed to notice my tension and leaned closer, whispering, "Relax, everyone's just having fun." But there was a condescension beneath it, subtle and deliberate, and it made my stomach churn. Then came the first truly awkward moment. She made a joke about my mother's cooking while everyone was at the table, exaggerating every gesture and facial expression. Laughter erupted, but it wasn't the warm, easy kind. It was nervous, uneasy, the kind that fills a room with tension. My mom's smile faltered. My dad cleared his throat. I wanted to intervene, but the words stuck in my throat. My heart pounded, and I realized this was more than just teasing. It was a performance, and I couldn't tell if it was playful or cruel. I took a shaky breath, telling myself to hold it together. But deep down, I knew something had shifted. The perfect party, the perfect night was teetering on the edge of disaster. And I had no idea how quickly it would spiral from awkward jokes to outright humiliation. It happened during the first toast. I had barely taken a sip of my champagne when Chloe raised her glass, flashing that radiant smile that had won everyone over, and began speaking. At first, it seemed innocent, light-hearted remarks about our relationship. Funny anecdotes, but then her words started to sting. I always wondered how someone could survive with a family so old-fashioned, she said, laughing a little too loudly. My heart sank. I felt my stomach tighten, a sick twist forming as everyone around us chuckled nervously. My parents' smiles faltered. My mom's fingers gripped the edge of the table. My dad's jaw tensed. The laughter that followed wasn't warm, it was awkward, embarrassed, and somehow cruel. I tried to intervene, whispering under my breath, "Chloe, that's enough." She only smirked at me, a flash of defiance in her eyes, and went on. She made jokes about my dad's work ethic, my mom's outdated taste in decor, even teasing my little brother for still playing guitar like a kid. Each word landed like a hammer against my chest, and I felt my face heat with anger and humiliation. Guests laughed, unsure how to react, and I could see my family shrinking in their chairs, trying to stay polite, trying not to show how hurt they were. My brother's hand brushed mine under the table, a silent plea for me to stop it. I felt torn. Part of me wanted to protect them, to pull her aside and demand she stop. But the other part of me couldn't believe this was happening in front of everyone I loved. Chloe glanced at me, a glint of amusement in her eyes, and I realized it wasn't an accident. This wasn't playful teasing anymore. This was calculated. She wanted to embarrass us, to assert herself, and the full weight of betrayal hit me like a punch. My heart pounded, my hands shook slightly, but I forced a smile, trying to regain control. As the toast ended and everyone sipped awkwardly, I realized the engagement party, the symbol of our love and unity, was already unraveling. And I had no idea yet that this was only the beginning. The story ends with a soft cliffhanger, signaling that Chloe's public humiliation is escalating and setting up the midpoint twist later that night. When the initial laughter had settled into awkward murmurs, I stepped away to catch my breath. My chest felt tight, my hands cold, and my mind was spinning. I thought I knew Chloe thought. I knew her sense of humor, her charm, but tonight, it was clear I had been wrong. And then I overheard something that made my stomach drop. One of her friends, leaning close and whispering so I could barely hear, said, "It was hilarious how you set them up tonight." Totally knew they'd fall for it. My blood ran cold. "Set us up?" I froze, the words echoing in my head. Chloe had planned this. Every jab, every mocking comment, every exaggerated gesture, it had been calculated. This wasn't a lapse in judgment or a poor joke. This was deliberate, premeditated humiliation. My hands clenched into fists at my sides, and I felt my face flush with a mix of rage and disbelief. I turned to find Chloe laughing quietly with her friends, eyes scanning the room as if seeking approval for the chaos she'd orchestrated. She looked back at me briefly, smirking, and in that instant, everything I thought I knew about her shattered. The woman I trusted, the woman I had imagined spending my life with, had just revealed herself. And worse, she seemed proud of it. I glanced at my family, their smiles strained, their eyes flicking between me and her, silently asking me to intervene. My heart ached for them. I felt like I had failed to protect them, to maintain control, to keep this night from becoming a disaster. And in that moment, I realized something terrifying. I had invited someone into my life who didn't share my values, my respect for family, or even the basic decency I thought was mutual. The knot in my chest tightened, and a cold clarity settled over me. I couldn't let this continue. I couldn't let her destroy everything that mattered to me. But how do you confront someone like this in front of dozens of friends and family without letting the situation spiral completely out of control? I pulled Chloe aside, stepping into the quieter hallway outside the main room, hoping to salvage what was left of my composure. The laughter from the party still echoed faintly behind us, but in that moment, it felt miles away. My hands shook slightly as I looked at her, trying to keep my voice calm. "Chloe, what was that?" I asked, teeth clenched. "The jokes? The comments? Were you serious?" She tilted her head, smirking like she had been expecting this confrontation. "Relax," she said, brushing a strand of hair behind her ear. "I was just having fun." "You're overreacting." My chest tightened. Overreacting. She had spent the entire evening mocking my family, and now she was turning it back on me, making me feel guilty for noticing. I felt my anger rising, a hot, hollow rage that made my stomach churn. "I'm not overreacting," I snapped, trying to keep my voice low. "You humiliated my parents, my brother. In front of everyone, you set them up. Do you even realize how cruel that was?" She shrugged almost casually, her eyes glinting with amusement. I thought it was funny. Everyone else laughed. "You just can't take a joke." Her words hit me like a punch. It wasn't just the public humiliation, it was the gaslighting, the audacity of making me feel like the villain for being hurt. For a moment, I doubted myself. Could I really be overreacting? But then I looked at her, eyes cold, calculating, unapologetic, and the doubt vanished. She wasn't joking. She didn't care about my feelings. She never had. I felt a mixture of fury and heartbreak, realizing I had been blind, seduced by charm and wit, and now faced the reality of someone who thrived on control and manipulation. I wanted to yell, to walk away, to do something drastic, but I needed to think. My family was still inside, still enduring her public performance. I couldn't let this continue. And that's when it hit me what I had to do. I had to make a decision, right here, right now. Before this night became something we could never recover from, I walked back into the party, my chest tight, hands clenched at my sides. Chloe was still in the center of attention, laughing and telling another story. This time about my family's quirky habits. The room was quiet for a second. The laughter, forced and uncomfortable, and my stomach sank. Every word she spoke felt like a knife twisting in my chest. I caught my parents' eyes, my mom's lips pressed tightly together, my dad's jaw rigid, and I felt a rush of protectiveness so strong it almost made me shake. "Seriously?" I muttered under my breath, more to myself than anyone else. But Chloe heard it, of course, and turned with that smug smile as if daring me to react. She made a comment about my little brother's guitar, exaggerating how childish it was. Guests giggled nervously, unsure whether to laugh or feel awkward. I could feel every uncomfortable glance on my family, and something inside me snapped. I wanted to pull her aside, yell, or storm out, but I realized that wouldn't fix anything. This wasn't just about a joke anymore. It was about control, humiliation, and boundaries being crossed in front of everyone I loved. I felt my blood pounding in my ears as I fought the urge to lash out physically. My vision narrowed on Chloe's face, trying to read if she had any inkling of the damage she was causing. But all I saw was amusement, almost predatory. For a fleeting moment, I thought about leaving the room and pretending it didn't bother me, but the thought of my family shrinking in their seats, embarrassed and hurt, made my chest ache. No, I couldn't let her do this. Not another word, not another laugh at their expense. And that's when the idea hit me, sharp and sudden. I realized that if I stayed silent, the humiliation would only escalate. I had a choice to keep enduring or to take control in a way that no one would expect. My hands tightened at my sides, and I knew that the next few minutes would change everything. It happened during what was supposed to be the highlight of the evening, the family toast. Chloe raised her glass, flashing that infuriating, flawless smile, and started recounting a funny story about my grandmother's old habits. I froze as the words tumbled out, each one sharper than the last. She exaggerated every detail, mocking the way my grandmother had always insisted on certain family traditions, twisting it into a punchline for the guests. My chest felt like it had been crushed by 100 invisible hands, and the room seemed to shrink around me. The laughter that followed wasn't lighthearted, was cruel and nervous, the kind that makes a person want to sink into the floor. I could see my mom pressing her palms to her face, trying not to cry. My dad's hands tightened around his glass, and my brother looked at me with wide, anxious eyes, clearly unsure whether to speak up. I felt frozen, paralyzed by a mix of fury, embarrassment, and disbelief. How could someone I loved so deeply treat my family this way in front of everyone? I tried to speak, to cut in, but the words caught in my throat. My vision blurred slightly, and I had to swallow hard to stop it from shaking. Chloe glanced at me, smirk lingering, as if daring me to react. Every instinct in me screamed to explode, to grab her and demand she stop. But I couldn't, because doing it in this moment might ruin everything socially and make the humiliation worse for my family. And yet, doing nothing felt like a betrayal. I retreated to a corner, taking shallow breaths, heart hammering, watching as she continued, oblivious to the emotional wreckage she was leaving behind. I had never felt this powerless in my life. The party, the celebration of our love, had turned into a public spectacle of cruelty, and I was watching my family suffer, unable to intervene. In that moment, I hit rock bottom. I realized that everything I thought I knew about Chloe, everything I believed about our future, had been a lie, and deep down, I knew I couldn't let it continue, not for me, and not for them. I couldn't stand it any longer. My chest was tight, my hands shaking, but my mind was crystal clear. I straightened, took a deep breath, and stepped toward the center of the room. The laughter faded as everyone turned to look at me, sensing the sudden tension. Chloe glanced at me, surprised, her smirk faltering slightly, but it didn't disappear. "Not yet." "Everyone, can I have your attention for a moment?" I said, voice firm, shaking just enough to let them know this was serious. The room quieted instantly. "I need to say something about tonight," I continued, my eyes locking onto Chloe's. She raised an eyebrow, tilting her head as if curious what I would do. I swallowed, my pulse hammering, and spoke the words that had been building inside me for weeks. "Chloe, tonight wasn't funny. Every comment, every joke you made about my family was cruel, calculated, and completely disrespectful." A hush fell over the room. Guests shifted awkwardly, whispering among themselves. I could see the shock in Chloe's eyes, but my parents' expressions softened slightly. "You planned this," I said, louder now, my voice carrying. "You deliberately humiliated the people I love in front of everyone, and I won't stand for it. Not in my home, not in my life." Chloe opened her mouth, but I cut her off. "This engagement is over. Tonight, in front of everyone, I'm calling it off." I let the words hang in the air, watching as the color drained from her face. Gasps rippled through the room. Friends of hers looked shocked, whispering. My parents' faces softened with relief, my brother's jaw dropped, and I felt a strange mixture of fear and empowerment surging through me. Chloe sputtered, tried to defend herself, tried to blame me for overreacting, but it was useless. In that moment, the power shifted. I had taken control, standing for my family, for myself, and for what was right. The humiliation she had tried to inflict now hung squarely on her, and for the first time that night, I felt a flicker of vindication. The room was stunned. Chloe's face was pale, lips trembling as she tried to form words, but the crowd of friends and family hung on my every word. I could see the disbelief in her eyes, the panic slowly spreading as she realized the tables had turned. She sputtered, attempting to justify herself, but no one was listening. The whispers of, "I can't believe this," and "Did he really just do that?" filled the room. Each one a tiny victory in the humiliation she had so cruelly orchestrated. My parents moved closer to me, a quiet, supportive presence that made my chest feel lighter. My mom whispered, "Thank you for standing up for us," and I felt a lump in my throat. My dad placed a hand on my shoulder, giving a small, firm squeeze, silently telling me I had done the right thing. Even my brother, who had been anxious the entire evening, let out a quiet, relieved laugh, as if a weight had been lifted off all our shoulders. Chloe's friends tried to intervene, murmuring excuses, but their words fell flat. Her carefully curated image of charm and wit was crumbling before everyone who mattered most. I watched her struggle, the confidence she had worn like armor peeling away, leaving only the sharp edges of arrogance and entitlement exposed. It was a strange mix of satisfaction and pity. I had loved someone who had hidden cruelty beneath a perfect mask, and now the mask was gone. I felt a mix of emotions swirling inside me. Anger. The night that had begun as a celebration of love had turned into a revelation of truth. For the first time, I saw clearly who Chloe really was, and what she was capable of, and, as the murmurs of shock and whispers of gossip filled the room, I realized something vital. I had taken back control not just for myself, but for my family. But even as I felt the power shift, I knew the story wasn't over. Chloe's reaction, her next move, and the aftermath of this public confrontation would ripple far beyond tonight. The room was silent for a moment. Then the reality of what had just happened began to sink in. Chloe's smirk had vanished entirely, replaced by shock, anger, and disbelief. She tried one last feeble attempt at justification, but her words sounded hollow, even to her. Guests shifted uncomfortably, many avoiding her gaze, and I realized that the social image she had so carefully cultivated had crumbled completely. For once, the laughter was gone and it belonged entirely to her humiliation. I looked at my parents and brother, their faces reflecting relief, pride, and something like awe. My mom reached out, squeezing my hand, while my dad gave me a small nod of approval. My brother whispered, finally, "Took you long enough." And in that moment, all the stress, shame, and anger I had carried over the past weeks lifted slightly. I had protected them, and that mattered more than anyone's opinion or Chloe's pride. I took a deep breath, letting the adrenaline settle, and felt a strange calm wash over me. For the first time all night, I was free. Free from the charade, free from the fear of social embarrassment, free from someone who had no respect for the people I loved. I knew there would be questions later, awkward encounters, maybe gossip, but none of that mattered. What mattered was the truth being out and my family standing strong, untarnished by her cruelty. As Chloe left the room in a flurry of frustrated mutters, her carefully built persona in ruins, I felt a quiet sense of victory, not vindictive, not malicious, but righteous. The engagement, the wedding, the lie of a perfect relationship, all of it was over. And I realized something powerful: standing up for what's right, protecting your loved ones, and refusing to tolerate abuse is one of the most empowering choices a person can make. I glanced around the room, my family safe, my dignity intact, and for the first time in weeks, I smiled. The night had been chaotic, humiliating, and painful, but it had also been liberating. We had survived Chloe's cruelty, and in doing so, we had discovered something stronger than any engagement or celebration: the unshakable bond of family.